I got the lesson. That lesson has lived with me forever, that we could do things to add more value to our customers that don't actually end up costing us anything. It's just about being a little nice. And we can 10x the profit or what we take in just by giving more value.
This is The Entrepreneur Way with Neil Ball. Unlocking the secrets of successful entrepreneurs 7 days a week. Subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Twitter at Neil D. Ball. Napoleon Hill said the power of the mastermind is the driving force. To discover how you can unlock the potential in your business using the power of a mastermind, go to mastermindunlimited.com. And now, here is your host, Neil Ball.
Hello everybody, Neil Ball here. Thank you so much for joining me today on The Entrepreneur Way. The Entrepreneur Way is about the entrepreneur's journey, the vision, the mindset, the commitment, the sacrifice, failures and successes. I'm so excited to welcome our special guest to the show today, Casey Eberhart. Before I do though, I just want to give you a quick thought. Thomas Berger said, "The art and science of asking questions is the source of all knowledge." The Entrepreneur Way asks the questions so we all get the insight, inspiration and ideas to apply in our businesses. Casey, welcome to the show. Are you ready to share your version of the Entrepreneur Way with us?
Neil, I've been looking forward to this for a couple of weeks now. I am so thrilled and honored. And let me just say from the outset that I really appreciate what you're doing for other entrepreneurs out there that are maybe looking for their way or struggling or just starting out on their journey. I think this is great.
Thank you, Casey. I appreciate that. Casey Eberhart is an international speaker, trainer, author, and business owner. He has spoken all over the world and is known as a super connector and value player. He is currently helping business owners expand their business. Casey has also co-authored a book, Stepping Stones to Success, with Deepak Chopra and Jack Canfield. Casey has been turning heads in the training industry with his formulas that are simple and easy to learn. An entrepreneur most of his life, Casey has a special affinity for saving businesses time and making more profit. Folks, hang on to what Casey is going to say for your dear life because he is going places. Casey, can you provide some more insight into your business and your personal life to allow the listeners to get to know more about you and who you are?
Yeah, sure. I grew up in Seattle, Washington, over here in the States, and moved to California in 1996, 95, 96. And I like to share just a couple of quick stories. One of them is from when I was 5. When I was 5, my grandfather, who was a true entrepreneur in the sense that he had multiple streams of income. Like this man had so many streams of income, it kind of makes that verbiage kind of a cliche at this point. And so I knew that I always looked up to my grandfather. And so when I was 5, he took me on this journey, this little tractor journey. And we drove by a house that he had on the property that was for rent. And he used to explain that he got an income stream from that. He had a garage where he restored old cars, and he got an income stream from that. He had an antique store, which in the Midwest here in the States, some people call it a garage sale, but he called it an antique store, which basically they sold their junk in their garage. And then we drove this tractor out into this pasture, and we drove on his land past his oil wells and his gas wells and his water wells, through all of his cattle. And one of the things, he shut the tractor down and he looked me square in the face and he said, Case, I'm going to teach you everything there is to know about business right here, right now. And so, I'm 5. I'm like, what? This is awesome. And he said, always treat the customer with more, always give the customer way more value than they ever expect, and everything else will be okay. Mm-hmm. And so, that's a pretty deep lesson for a lot of people right out of the gate in their 5, 6 years old. And so, in order to prove that lesson to me, he took me to the antique store and he told me I could sell anything I sold. I got to keep the money from. So I'm like a kid in a candy store, almost literally. And these two ladies came in, and I'll never forget, they bought these 2 pieces of glass. And the glass is we call them a transformer, an insulator. And back in the 1920s and 30s, these insulators stood on top of electric electric poles and conducted electricity. So they're super thick glass. These things are never going to break is essentially where I'm going with this. And they were $2. And so they came up and they paid for it, and I wrapped them in newspaper. And I look at my granddad, and he's got one eyebrow raised, like, "What? This isn't really the deal." So I said, I got to figure out how to give him more value. I just learned this lesson, so I put him in a bag. I still look over there; he's still not satisfied. So then I put him in a cookie tin. There was this metal cookie tin for safe traveling, and he still wasn't satisfied. So I'm like, gosh, I don't know what else to do. So I was kind of frustrated. And so I said, well, let me walk these out to the car. So I walk them out to the car, and I open the door for the two ladies to get out of the store. We walk to their car, and I open up the driver's side door for the lady because I had learned learning manners when I was that young. And she got in, and I went over to the passenger side of the car, and I opened up the back seat of the car, and I took the package that they just bought, and I basically put it in the back seat of the car, but I seat belted it into the back seat of the car for safe traveling. And then I opened the passenger door, and the lady in the passenger side opened up her purse and handed me a $20 bill as a tip for being such a good kid of making sure these things traveled. And at that moment, Neil, I got it. I got the lesson. That lesson has lived with me forever, that we could do things to add more value to our customers that don't actually end up costing us anything. It's just about being a little nice. And we can 10x the profit or what we take in just by giving more value. So, making a long story short, I took that lesson throughout my life. I ran an amusement park and a water park up in Seattle. We ended up selling that to Six Flags, and we can get more into that if you want. But, I worked there 9 years. I was part of the team that helped sell it. And once we sold that, I moved to Los Angeles to work in the movie business. And my love of networking and relationship building and connecting really took a stronghold here in Los Angeles. I ended up very quickly earning an Academy Award for a movie called Being John Malkovich back in the 90s.
Wow, really?
And from there, my career has been built on buying, selling, and building companies. How do we add value? How do we create more profit for the businesses? And most recently, I've been working on a mastermind training accountability program. We've had that running for a couple of years now. And it's really designed for businesses that are really in need of saving time, making money, and creating extraordinary results for folks. And so that's kind of the history.
Wow, that's fantastic. Sounds awesome. So what do you enjoy most about what you do, Casey?
Neil, one of the things I love working with and really getting in and dissecting somebody's business and their business model. I have a unique ability, I think, over time, having worked in multiple verticals, multiple price points, multiple different product lines. I have a unique ability to be able to dissect somebody's business and very quickly put it back together in a sense that in a way that helps them produce extraordinary results. So what I love most about the journey is when we come up with a plan for a business owner, we implement that plan, and the results are even better than what we had anticipated. I'll give you an example. I work with a cruise planner, a travel agent who represents cruise lines. And we've been working together for about the past 18 months. And, we're going into a brand new year, and we already have on the books travel for this year more than all of her previous year. And we're only a few days into the new year. So if we did nothing, we'd still make more money in that business this year than we did all of last year. We're only a few days into the new year. So, when you have a business owner that really stands for producing extraordinary results, and I can come in and help with that, that's what makes the journey completely worthwhile and fun for me.
Excellent. That's really interesting that you've done that, because this idea of over-delivering value is something I'm a real advocate of. It's fantastic. So you talked about... Go on.
I was just going to say, the value proposition, the reality is that all we're doing is zigging when everybody else is zagging. We live in a time where it's all about total automation and less effort, and, we'll send out 1 million emails in hopes of selling a few, versus having a group of super fans that produce results and referrals back to you over and over again with processes and systems put in place. it's kind of a winning combination because we're just going back to doing what people really did in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, which is treat people way better than they're going to get from somebody else.
Yep.
And everything else kind of works itself out.
Yeah, absolutely. So you talked about dissecting businesses. So how about dissecting what drives you? What is it that makes you do what you do?
Boy, you know, I don't know any different. Mm-hmm. What I learned from my business coaches early on in my business career was that if you're always in kind of service to others and service to other business owners and building a community and using your talents and your gifts to move the needle for other people, then everything else tends to work. Right. And so it's kind of funny. I don't even know how to explain what I do to like my parents. Like I couldn't explain what I do to my parents. I couldn't explain what I do to a lot of my friends. So what drives me is really when somebody takes something that I've said or we've put a plan down on paper and that plan gets executed and we get the results that we were desiring or better results than we were desiring. That's what really drives me is how can we push this campaign? How can we push this podcast? How can we push this speaking event to really maximize the experience that the audience has? And if we do that properly, then we're going to create some fans. And if we create some fans, those fans do what? Those fans tell other people about us. Yeah. And so, you know, I think it's what really drives me is entrepreneurs and businesses that are somewhat coachable and that they have this thirst for learning and trying new things. And when that quest is fulfilled or, you know, we quench that thirst with a new idea, a new thought or a new concept, or we're trying something new and it works, or we at least have some results. I'll say that's probably better, that we have some results. That's really the driver for me. Okay. I mean, that's what really drives me.
And how do you relax when you're not working in your business?
That's a great question. I don't. You know, I mean, one of the things that I think as business owners, and this is just my kind of approach to things, you know, there's this concept of balance that a lot of coaches and trainers and thought leaders talk about as balance. And I actually hate the word balance. I don't use it. I've eradicated it from my vocabulary because to me, balance implies that you have two things and you're having to choose either or: work, family, church or school or cello lessons or reading or whatever. And I really look at what I do as a workable situation. So I don't really talk about balance. I talk about what's workable, what's workability. And so for me, I've just created a business around the idea that I can do whatever I want. So because I can do whatever I want, I never flip into work mode versus home mode. I create a workable situation. So for me, relaxing is, you know, going on a cruise with 150 friends of mine and all talking business, right? Relaxing for me is this. I'm probably in a more relaxed state right now because I feel completely present to doing our job as, you know, interviewee to deliver a great interview for the listeners, right? Yep. So I think it's about, I don't really turn off the switch and try to relax. I mean, even when I'm watching TV, I've got my computer in front of me for the most part, and I'm, you know, reading a blog post I constantly learn. So maybe the better answer is I relax by learning. So for me, learning is listening to podcasts, watching webinars, getting on marketers' lists and watching and studying how they write things and what they do, and studying the kind of the gurus out there and seeing what they do and figuring out if there's a way to bring their content back to my audience in a way that's digestible and easy to understand.
And do you have any entrepreneurial role models?
Boy, yeah, it's just so many. It's kind of hard to say. You know, I am a huge fan of Gary Vaynerchuk. Gary and I spoke on the same stage gazillions of times. I really like Barbara from Shark Tank. Most of my entrepreneur gurus are probably people you've never heard of. You have Jason Palliser. Mm-hmm. Jason Palliser is one of the founders of REI Black Book out here in the in the States. My role models are really my clients and the people that are part of my community, because I draw so much energy from them that it forces me to give back that same amount of energy. So, I love Robert Kiyosaki. He's one of the first guys that kind of put me in this in this space. You got Gary Vaynerchuk. Yeah. There's a guy named Bob Crisp that's written a couple of books that I think are really great. I think a lot of my gurus are people you kind of just would see all over Facebook.
Yeah, I've heard of a few of those. I've heard of Gary Vaynerchuk and Robert Kiyosaki, but some of the others I haven't. And I've heard of Shark Tank, but...
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting, I think a lot of times, when I probably learn more from, quote, non-gurus than I do from gurus, only because I think I spend so much time with the gurus out on the circuit, the speaking circuit, that I'm sure a lot of that rubs off on me, and it shows up in how I present and how I provide for the community, the audience. But, I don't actively, there's a bunch of people I actively take on. Lewis Howes, I read a bunch of his stuff. So I got all kinds of people. Jeffrey Gitomer is a good one. Napoleon Hill from Think and Grow Rich, another good one. Yeah. Jeff Olson from The Slight Edge, another good one.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. So can we go back to the time before you were an entrepreneur? And I'm not quite sure where your journey began at present, but I'm sure you're going to tell me. What difficulties did you have to overcome when you first started as an entrepreneur?
I think it's I think it's kind of the same plight that all entrepreneurs go through. And so my journey started when I was really young. I mean, back when I was 5, I was doing businesses. In junior high, I sold candy at my locker in junior high. I had a catering company when I was 9. I never did any jobs, but I had a catering company when I was 9. And I think the thing that's always been really the only stumbling block for me is listening to other people. And I should say, having other people give me unsolicited opinions and advice. Yeah. I always look to increase the caliber of people I'm around and hanging around. Like, I always want to be the dumbest one in the room. That's kind of my joke, is if I'm the smartest one in the room, I got a problem. If I'm the dumbest one in the room, I have a ton to learn, which I'm stoked about. So I think the biggest hurdle that's always happened for me is when somebody says, "Oh, that's a dumb idea. That's never going to fly. That's a trend. That was a fad." It's like currently I'm dealing with this situation where, I'm an investor in a craft beer tap room, which is a unique experience. This is a craft beer and craft wine setup. So we don't do regular beers. We do craft beers, right? So it's funny going out and talking to some of these people. They all are like, "Oh, well, isn't that a fad? Hasn't that already passed?" And it's just like, no. And by the way, you're a hypnotherapist. What the hell do you know about craft beer? You don't know anything about the community. You don't know anything about the audience, and you give unsolicited advice from a completely point of view where it is not helpful. I think that's the biggest drawback of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. There's lots of people wanting to give lots of advice when they know nothing about stuff sometimes. So did you have any doubts that delayed you starting your business in the first place then?
I don't. I mean, I think the doubt is the same that all entrepreneurs have, which is, what the hell am I doing? And will anybody pay me for it? And is there an audience? Is there a distribution channel? Do I solve a problem? Right? I know this. I know that at the end of the day, people only buy one thing. They buy solutions. So I just set out to always be solving a problem. No matter what business is in, it's always a business that is focused around solving somebody's problem.
And what mistakes did you make that slowed your journey?
Ego. I've always shot pretty high in terms of achievement, pretty rapidly. I was in California for only a couple of years and I won a bunch of awards. And in amusement parks, I was coming up with programs that were being sold all over the world. I just think it's, I'm all over the map with this one. I just think that what's ultimately happened is that people try to get involved and giving poor advice.
Yeah. Okay. And what are some of the things that you did before you started your business that would be helpful tips for some of the listeners who haven't yet taken their first step on the entrepreneur's way in terms of the journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. Here's the thing, Neil. One of the things I learned very early on was that the more people I was connected to, the better. And so even now, I start off almost every presentation with the concept that connectivity is today's new currency. So what I really focus spending my time on is building my network and building my group of people and trusted advisors. And I think that's something that everybody can do no matter where they are in their career, is make an outward effort to go add people to your network and mentors and advisors and people that you can bring value to. So, I think if you are somebody that hasn't built a big business yet, or you're still looking to build a business, now's the time to pick up the phone, reach out, take a couple of the most influential people in your network or people that you know to coffee and say, how can I help you?
Yeah.
And get into the habit of looking at how you add value to somebody before you withdraw. So if I were to go back, I did this back when I was even a kid and I still do it today. I mean, it's just unconscious for me to do it at this point. But I look at every person, business person or not, as opening a checking account when I meet them.
Yeah.
In my head, it's a mental checking account. And think of it like a social capital account. And every time I give value or content or do something to help them, I'm depositing into that bank account. Every time I ask them to do something, buy something, invest in something, listen to this, do this, watch this, give me your email address for this, that's a withdrawal. And so my goal is always to be adding more deposits into bank accounts than I am withdrawing. And I think that's where, if I were starting over, or if I was back before I was in the entrepreneurial space, I'd still be doing that today, is meeting people, finding the influencers. How do I help those influencers influence others? And then you become an influencer.
Yeah. So it's about being a go-giver, isn't it? I suppose I think some people refer that to us. Have you heard that phrase? Yeah. And so can we just move forward a little bit now into the time when you've obviously got into being an entrepreneur and the journey itself. When you're an entrepreneur and you first set up a business in the beginning, how important do you think culture is in that business?
Culture?
As in how you organize people and how you motivate people and how you run your business.
Well, it's a great question. I think it's everything. And I'll give you an example. Here in the States, a lot of businesses tend to hire on skill set and fire on attitude or culture, right? So they put an ad out and they're looking for specific skill sets in computer programs or administrative tasks or creative whatever. And then they hire people based on a skill set and they fire them based on attitude. They don't fit into the culture of the company. So one of the things that we do with all our companies that I'm a consultant with is the first thing that we do is we flip that. And we flip it so that people are hiring on attitude and firing on skill set. Meaning we'd much rather bring in somebody that fits and meets our culture and train them how we want them to do whatever skill set we want them to do. Yeah. And if they don't keep up, then we can let them go. But we first have the culture piece because we can't change that. No. Or we can't change somebody's attitude, so to speak. But we certainly can create a culture around our same value and beliefs. I'll give you an example. I cannot, will not, do not want to ever work in an environment where it is required to wear a suit and tie. Not my bag. It's not for me. It's too stuffy. It just doesn't work for anything about me. So when I interview people for assistance or I have people work with me, one of the things I will say to them is, look, I'm a pretty casual guy. Do not wear a suit and tie. And I have people that show up for interviews wearing a suit and tie. And I just politely say, the interview doesn't even need to go on because either you don't listen.
Yeah.
Right? Because I literally told you how to dress, or you're not going to fit the right culture because that's how you want to dress, and we're not that kind of organization.
Okay. So knowing what you know now, is there anything that if you'd known it when you started would have helped you to shortcut the learning curve?
Geez, there's so many lessons that I wish I would have known ahead of time. I made a mistake. One of my biggest business mistakes of all time was I had sold an equipment rental company for film and television equipment, and we had made $1 million. So we were millionaires, and we were just clicking our heels. We were so excited to be millionaires. We thought we had we were young, so we thought we had just, figured out how we were going to take over the planet. And we then decided that we were going to buy another business, and in that business, we bought a clothing manufacturing business. So some people call it a sweatshop, but I'm in marketing, so it's a perspiration salon. But we promptly lost $1 million in about a year and a half. And the biggest lesson that came out of that was that not all business is exactly the same. See, we thought we had figured out fundamentals of business and that we could transfer those skills to any business possible just by buying a business that was already up and running. And we just grossly underestimated the value of having some experience in a vertical before going in and buying a multi-million-dollar business in that vertical.
I think you sort of alluded to something there that I'm about to ask you about now. How much does gut feeling influence your decisions in your business?
As I get older, more and more. Well, I should say that there was probably kind of a bell curve. I mean, when I was really young, in my 20s and my early 30s, I was making gut decisions that in my head, I knew I had so much time before retirement. I didn't really care. I mean, I built 26 houses out in Las Vegas. I was looking at buying a bar out in Las Vegas. So I was going on a lot of gut. Then I kind of came into my mid to late 30s and started to shift and go, okay, now I'm going to have to be really careful and conservative in when I make those business decisions. And then as I entered into my 40s, my early 40s, I am now, that's where I live now. And I would say that most of my decisions all of my decisions have to pass the gut check.
Yeah.
I won't even entertain it if it doesn't pass the gut check. So I would say the gut check is probably a bookend, right? It's probably the first thing that I run through and the last thing that I run through. So I'll do a gut check. I'll see how it feels. I'll then do all of my research, get it ready to make the decision, and then I'll go back to what does my gut feel?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's good. Casey, life is made of constant changes, I'm sure you know, whether we like it or not. And I believe that the only constant, or one of the only constants, is change. So, Casey, how do you try to keep up with change?
Oh, I love it. I love being interviewed by somebody that has really good questions. A change is scary for a lot of people, and a lot of business owners are terrified of change. And so I know that the only consistent thing in business is change. And so for me to keep up, I know that I lead a group in my platinum circle. I'm the leader. So I'm the guy they all look to for marketing strategy, strategic advice, so on and so forth. So I have to stay current. So a couple of things that I always keep in mind is no matter how fast things change, it's impossible for any one person to stay up on all the changes in real time. It's impossible. The technology moves too fast. What I can do is I can stay up on the leading forefront of where I think it's going to best serve my clients. So when I'm looking, for example, we are right now and we're on a podcast. Well, I know that podcasts are getting put on websites and on iTunes and on the phone and all of this jazz. Well, I know that 3 to 5 years from today, websites are going to be pretty much a thing of the past. We're moving quickly towards a complete mobile environment. Desktop computers over here in the States are pretty much being phased out of production. We're all going to laptops. Laptops will be phased out in the next few years. Tablets and phones are going to merge to become one unit, one device. So I'm looking now 3 to 5 years out. What can I do now to learn the mobile space so that my clients now that are really focused in on content providing and content creation online, how we can start to move that to a mobile environment, right? And so it's a matter of I read a lot. I watch a lot of webinars. One of the reasons why I love being a speaker is I go out on the circuit and I listen to all the amazing speakers out there talk about what's happening in their particular niche. So it's a pretty good overall thing, but I always continuously learn.
Yeah.
If I'm not watching a webinar or reading a book, every day or every couple of days, I start to Jones.
Well, that's a great answer, and it's a good segue to my next question, which is, what is your favorite book on entrepreneurialism, business, personal development, leadership, or motivation? And can you tell us why you've chosen it?
Oh, wow. There are a couple. I have a few.
Okay.
So Crush It by Gary Vaynerchuk is one of my favorite books of all time. In Crush It, Gary basically talks about figuring out the one thing that you're great at and just do it.
Yeah.
I love Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki because I think it's a fundamental base for entrepreneurials everywhere. There is another book that is a relatively unheard of book in terms of entrepreneurialism because it speaks primarily to a network marketing or home-based business crowd called Feeding a Giant by Robert Crisp, that I just think is a phenomenal book in terms of creating channels of distribution and product selection, and then moving those products through the distribution.
Okay.
Those would be the ones that I would say off the top of my head.
That's a great selection. Everyone, when you have a busy life, listening to audiobooks is a great way to expand your knowledge in the time when you may be doing other things, such as driving or when you're working out at the gym. We have a special offer for you of a free audiobook of your choosing. To choose your free audiobook, go to www.freeaudiobookoffer.com. As long as you haven't already signed up, then you will qualify. Casey, what I'd like to do now is zoom forward into the future a little bit. So what one thing would you do with your business if you knew that you could not fail?
What one thing I would do if I knew I could not fail? Go on more cruises and have my check go up. No, I joke. I joke. That's actually kind of accurate. I mean, I don't know if I want to fail, right? To me, when we stop failing is when we stop learning. Yeah. And so for me, I never encourage this kind of pursuit of perfection. I want a pursuit of excellence, but I always want to fail. I want to be failing constantly. I know it's kind of a kick to the teeth sometimes, but I'm always looking for ways to add residual income to my multiple streams of income kind of mentality. So I would say there's lots of things that I would like to try that may or may not fail. But for me, it's I've set out on this path to create investments and businesses that have a residual component to them, or a multi-month product. I'm not I don't normally sell a bunch of products that I'm just selling one time.
And what skill, if you were excellent at it, would help you most to double your business?
I would think maybe the technology side. I think we were talking before we started the interview that, one of the things that I really one of my initiatives this year is to be interviewed on at least 100 podcasts, right? So I think the skill of being able to be a good interview where there's not people that are actively live watching me is a great skill that will help me double the business. Mm-hmm. Speaking, we pretty much got that one dialed in. I would say probably from a technology standpoint, keeping up with all the technical pieces, what piece goes where on the website, and always be tweaking in terms of providing the audience and providing our tribe the best overall experience we possibly can.
Okay. And now we're going to look right out into the future. In 5 years from now, if a well-known business publication was publishing an article on your business after talking to your customers and suppliers, what would you like it to say?
No wonder he retired 4.5 years ago. You know, it's really interesting. I don't normally look 5 years out. So looking 5 years out, I think that my customers and clients will have said that I've left a mark on their business in a way that's provided a better platform for them to run their business. Mm-hmm. So I'll tell you kind of my philosophy, and you know, everything I do kind of ties into this similar philosophy, and that is that when we're born and when we die are dates, right? 1972 to, 2000, whatever, 2100, whatever, 2200, whatever. And our whole life on a headstone is really described by one little dash, right? 1972 dash, and then the date you pass away.
Yeah.
Everything I do, whether it's in my business life, in my personal life, in my community life, in my spiritual life, wherever, is all designed for me to help make that dash as thick and as full as possible. And if I can help other people move their dash thicker and fuller, or move their needle more in saving more time or making more money, then I've won. So I think 5 years from now, I think you'll have a group of people that will say he helped move the needle, or he helped us create a better platform.
Mm-hmm. Right, that's a great mindset. I like that. We've now got to the part of the show where you share your 3 golden nuggets. So, Casey, what is your favorite quote and how have you applied it?
Oh, geez, my favorite quote, I don't even have to think for more than a second on that. My favorite quote of all time is this: opportunities multiply as they are seized. And what I realize about being an entrepreneur is sometimes you have to just say yes and figure it out later. And those people that are always taking chances and trying new things and seizing opportunities tend to be the ones where the opportunities fall in front of them more often. Mm-hmm. And people that don't take opportunities and they're so scared, like I always crack up. Like people will say, "Oh, well, where can people get a hold of you?" And I'll say, "Well, go to expandthebusiness.com and give me your email address, and I'll send you this really cool audio book on how to generate unlimited referrals." Mm-hmm. And they get freaked out, like that by me asking for their email address, that somehow I'm going to come, send the government for their firstborn. And I just always look at that kind of stuff. I'm just like, somebody's giving you something for free. If it's something of value to you, then seize the opportunity and see what comes of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I think that's a great quote for most business owners. It does open up the door for people to take on shiny objects, but I think if you develop the skill set of being able to pick and choose those opportunities, but always be looking to say yes versus saying no.
Yeah, great answer. And do you have any favorite online resources that you'd like to share that would be useful for our listeners?
You know what? This may sound like a bizarre answer to that, but I think the best online resources that I use are YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter.
Okay.
And I think the reason is because they are all encompassing. You can learn how to do anything in the world by going to YouTube and typing in how to blank.
Yep.
I think Twitter is a great place from a resource perspective of breaking news. Mm-hmm. I mean, something happens and it's on Twitter within seconds. And then I think from a resource perspective, Facebook is a great resource in terms of understanding what people that are in a quasi-business family environment look for, take stock of, read, consume. I think those 3 online resources are fantastic. And of course, listening to the podcast at the Entrepreneurial Way, for sure.
I agree with you. And what is your best advice to other entrepreneurs? If you could just pick one thing that you'd say, which is your best piece of advice?
Well, I think I've got to go back to kind of how we started, and that is that take a lesson from my grandfather, which is, the first one is always give way more value than people ever expect to receive, and everything else works itself out. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing I would say is to understand at your core, not just something that you do because it's on your calendar or it's on a blog post or it's on a Facebook or whatever, but really at your core, understand that connectivity is today's new currency. Mm-hmm. And so being able to spend some time connecting with people on a real level will always outproduce some quick marketing run.
Yeah, that's awesome. Everyone, if you didn't manage to get a note of Casey's favourite resources or his favourite book, then you can find the links on Casey's show notes page. Just go to the Entrepreneur Way and search for Casey or Casey Eberhart in the search box. Casey, is there anything else that you'd like to add about your business?
Well, Neil, thank you so much for doing what you're doing and bringing a lot of resources to people that are just getting started. And I hope that the audience that you guys got some value out of today, I hope you'll obviously subscribe. And, I'll give you a plug for how important it is for people to review podcasts up on iTunes and Stitcher. And so wherever you heard this, go leave a review for Neil and the show. The more reviews he gets, the higher the 5-star reviews, the higher it goes in rankings. So that's one way to be able to help Neil and the show out. And the second thing is, if you got some out of me, I'm all over Facebook. You can't not find me if you go search Casey Eberhart on Facebook. But I have a CD that if you want to have a way to generate a ton of referrals, I have an audio CD called Get More Referrals Now that you guys can go pick up. It's free. Normally when I'm out on the road, I normally sell it for $150, but it's yours free just for listening to us on the show today. All you have to do to grab it is to go to expandthebusiness.com. So just go to www.expandthebusiness.com. You can grab a copy of it, and I'd love your thoughts and feedback. And Neil, it's just been such a thrill and an honor and a pleasure to hang out and provide some value.
Well, Casey, it's been an absolute honor having you here as well. You've really come up with some great ideas and some great answers to these questions, which have given me a lot of insight, and I'm sure the listeners will also get a lot of insight, which will help us and inspire us in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to The Entrepreneur Way. Subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Twitter @Neil D. Ball.